Now for Global Business Updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. All our viewers, begin in Asia. Losses extending, blood red. I heard you guys just talking about Hong Kong a moment ago. I think they're second place in terms of the worst losses this morning, but Korea leading the way. Tech stocks, SK Hynix, Samsung falling. You can see the same thing with Japan. Hong Kong, look at that 1.96. Shanghai. Basically, there's still this fear of this AI trade. Let's quickly move on to India. We previewed this yesterday. Here is your October trade data for India. Your trade deficit, the difference between your exports of 34.4 billion, imports of 76. India has been importing a lot of gold. They love gold over there. They're part of the reason why prices have been rising. That was October. Now, let's move to November. This was the latest data. They narrowed that trade deficit to 24.5 billion. So they exported they exported 38 billion and brought in about 62 billion, almost 7 billion of that going to the US, despite the trade tariffs. They are still talking. Let's look at the Trade Commerce Secretary for India, Mr. Rajesh Agrawal, saying that India has held fort on the US exports despite tariffs. There's a fair expectation that both countries will be able to agree to a deal to lower reciprocal tariffs. We are positively engaged with the US to see if we can close sooner rather than later. So just that trade deficit, that's I think a 5-month low. US markets yesterday also in the red. Dow, Nasdaq, the Dow S&P 500, Nasdaq, and the Russell 2000, which has the small cap stocks. Look at your S&P. It closed at 6,900. That was a new record on Thursday. Look at that, 6,860. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq has applied to the Securities and Exchange Commission to allow 23-hour trading. It looks like they want to want to trade for as long as possible. That could bring in some volatility in case investors are not able to digest earnings quickly enough, but there's some support. I mean, we're seeing indexes over in the UK and some in Europe also wanting to extend trading. We're almost going to be seeing 24-hour trading if it is approved. They're looking at the third quarter of 2026. Moving on from there, Ford. One of my colleagues drives a big giant Ford here in Nigeria. I won't mention who that is. Could be a female male colleague. $13.65. Ford shares, actually this, I don't think this is correct. Ford shares were actually up. Should be plus 0.8%. Despite the market falling, Ford shares were up. And if we take a look at this here, they announced that they're taking a $19.5 billion charge on electric vehicles. They've lost about $13 billion on EVs since 2023. And they said they are pivoting. Part of this is because they're just not seeing the profits yet. And also, and Rufai has talked about this a lot, the $7,500 electric vehicle credit that Biden put in for EVs, that incentive was yanked away by Trump. And so the players in the sector who have planned around that policy, they're now taking their losses. But they're moving towards hybrids. They said hybrid sales are up. And they've said that the share of electric vehicles in the United States, according to the Ford CEO, has gone from 12% to about 6%, so it's dropped. Still, a lot of automotive news. Tesla was up yesterday, 3.56%, despite the markets falling. And why is that? It's because of that viral video that we had over the weekend. Investors are now more confident that Tesla's robo-taxi plans can actually be successful. And it was based on this viral video that over the weekend in Austin, Texas, of the car with no human being inside driving itself. Despite the markets up, Tesla was up. Despite the markets being down, rather, Tesla shares. By the way, I hear Elon Musk's wealth now, according to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index, is at $600 billion based on new valuation for SpaceX. We hear SpaceX, there's a rumor they might actually try to IPO in 2026. Could be a 27 billion IPO, which would place it above Saudi Aramco. Elon Musk could be your first ever trillionaire. In fact, by the way, the richest families added $350 billion this year. They are 2.9 trillion. The rich keep getting wealthier in the K-shaped economy. General Motors, it's all about cars today. They were up by 1.35% despite the market falling. That's because they've announced a deal with Apple. I think Apple was down or up. Where's Apple? Apple was up yesterday. No, down, excuse me. Apple was down yesterday, so 1.5% fall. But they've agreed on a deal to where General Motors will now add Apple Music to its new vehicles, its Chevrolet and some other models. Cars now are like phones. You will be able to download Apple Music through and over the call it over-the-air update, basically like a software update on your phone. It's the same with Teslas and the like. So they announced that deal. It's a shame we never got the Apple car. We thought that would be something that would, strengthen the Apple ecosystem. It would be great, to have your Mac, your AirPods, your Apple Watch, your everything inside the vehicle. Nigeria inflation, 8th month of deceleration, 14.45 year-on-year. Month-on-month, though, we did see a tick up, 0.93 in October to 1.2. So we continue to see a deceleration there. Food inflation at 11. This is your chart. And again, I remind people, inflation, prices are still rising. Inflation simply measures the pace. So they can rise like this, or they can rise like this. It's just right. They measure the pace at which prices rise. That's your year-on-year. Month-on-month, I mean, you can even see there was actually deflation for a couple months in Nigeria on a month-on-month basis in September and October, but that's for food inflation, that taken up just a bit. The Bureau of Statistics said it was crayfish. I like crayfish in my stew, by the way. So it was crayfish, tomatoes, tubers, and I think potatoes. Lastly, reforms. Talked about global investors. This is Phoenix Kalen. She's the Director of Emerging Markets Strategy with Société Générale, one of the biggest investment banks in France. And we played this on the afternoon session of the Global Business Report. The question was asked to her, and we included the question, are there any emerging market reforms that have taken place that global investors have missed, that were under the radar? And she said no. In fact, global investors have taken note of what happened in Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and she's also saying that they are projecting more upside to the markets in those particular territories. Here she is.
Okay, so that's one thing we're watching in emerging markets. Something else, reform-driven developments. Where in emerging markets are you seeing reforms that maybe go under the radar, not getting enough attention from global investors?
Well, I think investors actually have been giving them a lot of attention, especially in the frontier markets. We have seen so much flows going into Egypt, into Nigeria as well. Those have been the most popular markets in frontiers this past year, and hence the strong outperformance from there. We expect for that to continue, and alongside other places like Kenya, for instance. So those are still places that are seeing fiscal consolidation, improved transparency around their governance and regulatory frameworks, more market-oriented kind of exchange rate dynamics, more free-floating regimes. So incremental gains toward a more market-oriented economy. So yes, I think those things are still happening, and investors are actually quite on top of it in terms of monitoring this. And the challenge now is really around kind of valuations. Do they warrant further investment? And in our case, we do think that for a lot of those frontier markets, Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, those are a strong place for further gains, especially from fixed income and the currency.
Finally, I mean, we're wishing everybody safe travels this Yuletide season, but I think this headline is really unfair to the airline industry. Airlines justify sky-high price fares amid public backlash. It makes it sound like the airlines are deliberately raising prices. We see this every festive season. Ladies and gents, it's a demand and supply issue. There's heightened demand for air travel. Even Rochvac, we'll look at it. When inflation for December comes out, we can actually disaggregate and go through the baskets and look at airfare. You'll see that it's risen. It's demand and supply. That's all we have for today. That's all we got.
I mean, I think the problem is Ford is not just competing in the EV space.
Ford,
apart from the Trump surcharge, the Biden, what's it called, subsidies, tax credit that was removed and all of that. Yeah. I think they're not just competing favorably. I mean, if I say straight off my head, apart from the F-152, the electric motor that was not really a big success. If I tell me one Ford electric car, that is up there in the market, I mean, not many. So I think they are not just competing favorably, but it's not for also them to change strategy. They should also look at other markets. And that's where the likes of BYD are coming to Africa to eat up their market. The likes of Xiaomi are coming to Africa to eat up their market. So I think that's just the case. As regards inflation, like I've always said, yes, is the rate at which things rise, but it also has to be realistic. Using the base year of last year is not a direct representation of what is happening now, because last year was a crazy year. Secondly, the fact that also when you look at the rebasing that has been done, you have already also shrunken the weighted average on food, which takes a very colossal part of the food inflation numbers. And so on paper, yes, it looks very good, but in reality, it looks very bad. And that's pretty much what is happening with the unemployment numbers today. If you ask me, what's the unemployment number in Nigeria? It's about 5-6%. But realistically, youth unemployment in this country is going up to about 40-50%. So on paper, the dynamics might look good, But in reality, it's not good. And that's why you see that what we really need, which are the FDIs. I'm not saying the FPIs are not important. I saw the show where you did with the distinction.
Yeah.
But like you said, the FPI is like, what is it called? It's like trading money. Trade, yeah, it's good, but it doesn't make an economy work. It's investment that has patient capital that makes an economy work. So I think these are the parameters we should look at.
Yeah.
I do think that President Trump's policies have had an effect on EV sales across board, not just Ford. If you look at it, just before the end of the tax credit scheme policy introduced by the Biden administration, before October 2025, there was a surge in the uptake of buying electric cars. And that was because people wanted to beat the race and take advantage of the credit of the system before it was done away with. Now, post that, electric vehicle makers in America have talked about how the US is lagging behind compared to their counterparts in China, the UK, Europe, who have policies that favor and support, particularly in the interest of climate change. Now, President Trump has consistently been a climate change denier, and based on this has said that it's a con job. There's no need for them to continue to promote, vehicles or businesses that support drawing back the effects of climate change. And so that has definitely significantly impacted the sales of electric vehicles in the United States of America. So you can't take that away. Not only Ford will be affected, other car makers might very well see that their sales have dropped because it's a challenge that's faced, all EV car makers, the whole industry, based on policies. And we can see how this policy direction from Biden administration to Trump administration, based on their take on climate change and whether or not it has an effect. Now, on the FS, I do agree with you. Yeah, of course.
Yes, of course.
I said it earlier on that yes, the operators should not take advantage of Nigerians, but I do agree with you on this in this instance, because it has been said the market is deregulated. It's based on market forces on supply and demand. Everywhere around the world, you see increases in certain on-demand services and products, and that's what happened in the airfare. What has been said is introduce more competition. When we have headlines like that, we abdicate government's responsibility for providing other alternative sources of transportation. If people could go by road, a lot more people would not be flying. Hence the opportunities for road travel. And so let us bring that into the mix. Let's talk about the multiple taxation that the people face. They talk about how sometimes they're able to recoup in December all the losses along. It's very difficult to run businesses, in certain industries. So let us give them kudos for that and not always knock them. Yes, they should be fair, but I also think that the federal government, the Nigerian government, has a role to play as well.
Some quick bullet points. Tesla testing robo-taxi in Texas, Austin, and, stock price going up 3.56%, you said. Well, I hope nobody will have any idea that robo-taxi will work on Nigerian roads. Because those electric vehicles, they are not designed with the expectation that they will go through all the bumps and the gully erosion-infected roads that we have in parts of Nigeria. So when it comes to technology, well, it's good to bring up the story purely for aspirational reasons. But I don't imagine that a robo-taxi will
or
work.
downfall
or Okada
on Nigerian roads.
But who said it can't work?
As for the figures by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, now you recall in 2024 when the president was presenting his projections for the Appropriation Bill 2025.
That's right.
He has set the target that he was expecting that by December 2025, inflation will come down to 15%.
Yes.
Now they've done 14.45%. Now the question to ask is this a case of the MBS walking to the answer that had already been pre-provided by the president of Nigeria? Because if you look at what is provided on paper, it is different from what we have in sheer reality. Although, even in the US, they say inflation, cost of living is still very high. The point is, we have not seen the effect in our private personal lives in terms of the cost of living. Nairametrics, I think yesterday, did what they call all items inflation. Now, the all items inflation is the measure of inflation across board. And they said food inflation across the country, that 10 states are doing very well. Anambra is there, Yobe, Katsina, all the other states in the north. The question to ask is, why is it that these same states we complain about in the north are the ones doing well with food inflation when we say farmers cannot go to the farms?
Right.
So that in itself is a major concern for me. But the stock market is not just having issues in Asia, also in the US.
Indeed.
Yesterday it went down.
Yeah.
But the whole issue is about the perceived bubble with artificial intelligence, with all those companies, ADM, Broadcom, Oracle, being heavily in debt, and that causing anxiety, among investors. Those are the issues, I think.